Since Hamas forces launched a surprise invasion of Israel in the early hours of October 7th, 2023, killing at least 1,200 people, mostly civilians. Thousands of Israelis have taken to the streets in sunrise protests to commemorate the day, while others gathered outside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's home, calling for the release of the remainder of hostages taken into Gaza that day. Many of those killed or taken hostage were attending the Nova Music Festival near the border with Gaza. In the days following this event, Israel turned its forces onto Gaza, leaving now almost 42,000 people dead, most of whom are women and children, and so much of that region displaced as well. In recent weeks, Lebanon's Hezbollah and Iran have also joined the fight as tensions continue to escalate in the Middle East. Well, for more on the current situation in the Middle East and particularly in Gaza, we're joined this afternoon by Dr. Federica Lezzi, Project Medical Coordinator at Doctors Without Borders, and Dr. Atila Kisla, who is the International Justice Cluster Lead at the Southern African Litigation Center. To both of our guests, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Dr. Lezzi, I want to begin with you this afternoon because you've been on 11 missions to Gaza with Doctors Without Borders, working as a pediatric surgeon. And this is the difficult question I've asked so many people who have been in a similar position to you. But when we say mostly women and children affected, on those 11 visits, what did you see?
Difficult, really difficult to explain everything in a few minutes. Let's say that in this mission, I worked in the Al-Aqsa hospital. That is the only hospital remaining in the central Gaza Strip, in the so-called humanitarian zone. All the NGO now in this moment are in this area. That is a very little area of like 40 kilometers square. Look, I want to answer you with a story so everybody can understand what I saw and what I want to say. A story of two of my patients, two children that arrived in the Al-Aqsa hospital emergency room that is supported by Médecins Sans Frontières. Amira, that is the eldest one, 9 years old, and the brother, Fares, 4 years old. Fares started to ask about his sister. She was just next to him, but because of the burn in her face, he didn't even recognize her. She could hear the voice of the brother, but because of the burn in the lungs, she even can talk to him. So, yeah, burn is like a death sentences in Gaza in this moment because we don't have water, we don't have antibiotics, we don't have materials to treat the burn patient. And you know, Amir, we know that when Amir arrived in hospital, we all knew that she would die. And for all the day that she remained alive, Amira was in pain because we don't have enough painkiller for her. This is what happened today in Gaza.
And that's one story in and amidst tens of thousands of stories. Dr. Kisla, what this war has done, and it's done many things, but perhaps key among them is that it's destroyed not only a generation of children, the future of a generation of children in Gaza, but many, many more to come.
Yes, certainly. And like you said, this is probably only one of the atrocious stories that we hear and read about. And if you look on the international law side of the things, of course, the provisional measures that were issued by the International Court of Justice this year in its various decisions were supposed to address exactly these kind of situations, whether it's like access to basic humanitarian needs or any other humanitarian relief. And through these stories, you can see that there's still a lack of implementation of these decisions. and the situation has unfortunately not much changed since the first provisional measures in January this year.
Certainly. And I want to talk to you, Dr. Kisla, about perhaps what the past year has shown us about the limitations of international law. But Dr. Lezzi, let me come back to you, and I want to go back to the case study that you just told us about. You talked about the fact that in cases where anyone has had serious burns, in this case we're talking about some of the children you've treated as a pediatric surgeon. But, when death is so probable in the past year for so much of the community the people living in Gaza, that death becomes more painful, more drawn out, more horrific because of what you said. No access to water, no antibiotics, nothing to use to ease the pain of a child who is going through something like a burn.
Yeah, exactly. Was completely like that. After each bombing in Gaza, what happened? That everybody started to run among the wounded, the dead, the body parts of no one, hoping every time not to find her daughter, her father, her mother. This is horrible. This is just terrible in the soul of the person. The remain of the bodies end up in a plastic bag. This is also an horrible vision, everyday horrible vision. After each bombing, everyone knows also that the remains found don't belong to any person, but a father and a mother must know that among the parts of the delivered body, there is their son. All this is just inhumane. It is unacceptable.
It's horrific. And there are so many new acronyms that organizations like Doctors Without Borders have had to come up with in the wake of what's unfolded in Gaza over the past year. One of them is Wounded Child, No Surviving Family.
Yeah, exactly. It's a new word, and is horrific in this definition. If everybody try to think, it's just a child that remain alone because his family is completely exterminated.
Dr. Kisla, the conduct of Israel and perhaps the lack of conduct by many organizations, countries around the world. Talk to us about the limitations of international law, because you mentioned, back in January, the ICJ ordered Israel to follow those provisional measures to prevent a genocide in Gaza. But obviously there are no powers to force Israel to do that.
Exactly. Cases like these or situations like these, like the one in Gaza, show us, of course, the limitations of institutions like the International Court of Justice, but also because the International Court of Justice was designed in that way. So it was designed to operate without, for instance, an enforcement authority. The same applies to the International Criminal Court, for instance. So, of course, these kind of situations illustrate the limitations. Yet there are the decisions by the International Court of Justice are still important, as we have seen, for instance, that they inform and influence public opinion, and more importantly, the opinion by the international community, by states. And states are, in this context, of course, one of the more powerful actors to influence other states, especially if they speak to Israel directly either, or the close alliances that Israel has with its supporting states. So in that regard, these decisions by the ICJ can have an impact indirectly. However, what we have seen with the deterioration of the situation, I mean, over the past year, we have seen in January, in March, and in May, if I'm correct, the ICJ issuing provisional measures or issuing additional provisional measures. that already is an inclination or shows us that the ICJ is not happy with the situation, of course, and is well aware of the situation. And it also speaks in favor of the deterioration of the situation, of course.
Yeah, it's been called one of the most destructive conflicts of the 21st century, coming up for 42,000 fatalities, almost 100,000 injuries, more than 10,000 people reported missing under the rubble. Dr. Lezzi and, of course, healthcare workers who themselves have put their lives on the line have not been spared from the horrors of Gaza. I've got what is probably an outdated number here, but some 500 healthcare workers killed since October 7. How do you see the next few months playing out?
It's not a good vision. You know, the extension of the conflict also in Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and with the entrance of Iran is not, of course, a good sign. You know, it's something that will not have a resolution if we don't resolve the problem of the past between Israel and the Palestinian. Don't give to Palestinian what the law, the International Court of Justice that mentioned, imposed. And if the international laws start to be followed in the proper way.
Dr. Federica Lezzi is a project medical coordinator with MSF. Dr. Atila Kisla is with the Southern African Litigation Center. Let me thank both of you for your time as we reflect on 1 year since Hamas's surprise attack on Israel and the war that's followed on Gaza, the death toll coming up for 42,000 people, mostly women and children.